Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of GC Live Talking Tuesday nights. As you can tell, we're on remote after already being on remote. So a little different setup here tonight, but it's the same program and plenty to talk about as South Carolina gets ready to take on Kentucky after being 2 weeks away from SEC play. Two games that they needed to have. I mean, look, we're going to get into it later on in the program. We've talked about it before, whether it be on the GC Live post-game show this past week, whether it be on Mix in a Water Monday, and we had Parker White on. At the end of the day, a win is a win, and being able to get confidence, especially for a team that desperately needed it, was critical when you look at having the opportunities to go up against Charlotte and SC State. Now, does that mean everything's all sunshine and rainbows with the Gamecocks? Certainly not. We know that. You'd be an idiot to assume that. But at the same time, too, I think it's kind of ridiculous to look at the fact of what they've done over the last 2 weeks and just dismiss it altogether. Because if you look at it, right, what were they supposed to do? They should have beat the crap out of Charlotte. They did that. They should have beat the crap out of SC State. They did that. And yet, here we are today, Tuesday, October 4th, heading into SEC play again. And there's some people, some, and I get it, but just hear me out. There are some that are going to look at the situation and they look at it the exact same way as they did, 2 weeks ago when they lost to Georgia. This team is not the same team that we saw against Georgia 2 weeks ago. They're not. I'm not saying they're going to go out there and beat Kentucky. I'm not saying they're going to go on and get 7, 8, 9 wins. I had them at 8 wins before the season. I think with the injuries more than anything, I still think this is a 7-win team. I'm not going to give you the popsicle headache of this win, that win. We're not going to waste the time doing that. But I still think this is a team that can be very good. In terms of being on schedule, right? I expected South Carolina to have their hiccups early on in the year from an offensive standpoint more than anything. Because you had a new quarterback. You had a new quarterback trying to learn a new system, trying to work more than anything with the guys around him and trying to make things work. We saw the growing pains early on in the year. And when you're going up against the Arkansas of the world on the road, when you're taking on Georgia week 3, it's not making excuses. The results are the results. But I wasn't shocked. Were you shocked? Maybe it was a little disappointing in terms of some of the things we've seen. Maybe the running game getting away from it early on in the year in comparison to what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. Maybe that was a little disappointing. Maybe some people had in their heads that South Carolina was going to look like a Big 12 team and start airing the ball out 40-something times because Spencer Rattler was here. It's not what pro style is. There's guys like Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes that air it out over and over and over. But when I think of pro style, I'm thinking of a quarterback between maybe 25 to 35 times a game you're going to throw the ball. And that's what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. I think South Carolina, they've thrown the ball, 23 and then maybe 27 times over the last 2 weeks. So, again, is this team where they should be right now? 3-2 from a record standpoint. I think a lot of us expected that. From an execution standpoint, they still have a long ways to go. Long ways to go. I'm going to look at some of the comments so far. Appreciate you guys listening in. Lady Bree, appreciate you joining us as you usually do. Appreciate you. And Intern Joe is with us once again. Always good to have Intern Joe. Get him sporting his Masters polo. And Joe, not to get too off track with the Gamecocks tonight, but you said you're going to be going back and working with the Masters, man. Congratulations.
That's absolutely. Yeah, I got a text today from Augusta National. I'll have the opportunity to go back and see some of the behind the scenes in their merch department as part of my minor for SPTE. So I'm super amped, super excited. I had a ball last year. It was unbelievable. That golf course is everything and more. So yeah, appreciate it, Mike.
No, it's a great time, and obviously for those who follow me on social media, and obviously with Gamecock Central as well, you guys know that I had a chance to go out with my grandfather and experience it with him. I think he just turned 94 years old. I mean, just absolutely incredible experience for the two of us. My brother went down there, my aunt, my girlfriend. It was awesome. It was absolutely incredible. So good stuff, Joe. Good stuff indeed. Look, we're going to get that number up there for people that want to call into the program. if you have a comment, shoot us a line. Shoot us a line. I know it's a Talking Tuesday. It's not a post game show, so we understand that it's not the exact same like after a game. But let us know what you think. You don't have to agree with us. Or necessarily me. I remember I wrote a story earlier in the week, Joe, saying that South Carolina is 3-2. It's okay to smile. And what the premise of that story wasn't to, piss people off or anything like that. I mean, look, whether it be on the forum, whether it be on social media, people are naturally just going to get pissed off. I mean, that's just the world we live in today. But the premise of that story was to point out that what else did you want to see South Carolina do during that 2-week span? I'm not saying there's no freaking issues with this team. There's plenty of them. Yeah. Shane Beamer would be the first to tell you that. But I think it's unfair to look at South Carolina against Arkansas, against Georgia, and now heading into this week and assume that they're the same team. Ultimately, what they do on Saturday will speak for itself. But I'm not saying South Carolina is going to go out there and beat Kentucky. But I just feel like this is a different team. They look comfortable in the offense. Yes, there were 2 interceptions last week from Spencer Rattler, but anyone with a freaking clue and anyone that's watched the game knows those shouldn't have been interceptions. I hate doing the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I hate that, right? But anyone that saw that knows that over the last 2 weeks in comparison to what I've equated, Joe, to Brett Favre throwing cross-body from the opposite side of the field, trying to go back shoulder, that just awful interception. It was ugly that Rattler had against Georgia. He's been much smarter with the football. He's been much smarter. But as a team, South Carolina needs to do a much better job of protecting the football if they want to have an opportunity to win this weekend. I'm going to let Joe take care of that. Looks like we got a phone call coming in, and then we will get into what they have to say. Chris, interesting. Can we comment on our offensive line being non-existent? First time listening. Chris, the offensive line, I'm not saying that there's All-Americans across the board, but the offensive line hasn't been the issue, especially the last 2 weeks. They really haven't. They've produced 240 yards an average over the last 2 games. The offensive line isn't the issue right now. Could you have said that earlier in the year? Certainly. I don't think that's the issue right now. I think the offensive line has been honestly pretty good. I really do. I think the offensive line's been pretty good. Now, they're going to be playing Kentucky this week. Kentucky's going to be bigger, faster, and stronger than what we've seen over the last 2 weeks in Charlotte, over what we've seen the last 2 weeks in an SC state. Can they do what they've done the last 2 weeks? I don't think they're going to be able to run the football for almost 250 yards. But can they establish the run? Because if you do that and you can gain the respect of Kentucky, and I think that's the biggest thing over the last 2 weeks, they've been able to put it on tape that they can run the ball. If Kentucky has respect for them, they're going to have to put an extra guy down the box, which is something we did not see the first couple of weeks. Why? Because teams didn't respect you from running the ball, from a running standpoint. I know we got Bree on the line here. Bree, what's going on?
Hey, Mike. I had a quick question and a small discussion for you. So quick question was, you mentioned Spencer's numbers were 23 and 27 on those games. And I had for the Georgia State game, he had thrown basically, you got a lot of people complaining about the swing passes, and he had thrown 10 horizontal passes. And I asked her about it. I said, is 10 out of 27 a lot, considering the coaches are saying he's supposed to be checking to those? Isn't that a good thing that maybe he's picking up on that coverage? And then the other one's a defensive question. So what did you think about that first thing? I mean, I think that's huge, man. He's picking up on the coverages and checking to those, and everybody's still blaming Satterfield for too many screens,
Well, Bree, I think the first thing is, in a world that we live in with fantasy sports, right, whether it be NFL, college sports, I think so many people get so caught up with just seeing it aired out over and over and over. And don't get me wrong, it's so much more fun watching it that way, right? It's great watching a quarterback air it out and do this, and it's a lot of fun. The dink and dunks in comparison to, seeing what Rattler did at Oklahoma, especially his first year when he was a freshman player of the year for that conference, it's not going to be as sexy. It's not going to be as exciting. I think what does frustrate some people is because of how things played out last year with South Carolina and how they struggled, especially with the zone concepts. It's difficult for some people to separate what happened last year. And I'm not saying to excuse it. This is no excuse. But what happened last year happened last year. The offensive line, I brought this up with the question that Chris has. And maybe people disagree with me. And I don't know how you feel, Bray, but I feel like the offensive line hasn't been the issue the last 2 weeks. Now, again, the competition is going to pick up this week. We all know that. But I feel like the offensive line has done a pretty good job. I really do. Even the Georgia game, as crazy as it sounds, they weren't the issue. They weren't the issue in that.
My breakdown on Georgia?
I'm saying
even Arkansas, we have finally gone back to Georgia State, and our O-line play has not really been the issue.
It's not the issue. Now, look, Bree, I will say this. Right? And this isn't trying to be like a Satterfield apologist, excuse me, or make it. I think when we look at the receiver, now granted, there's plenty of things I could sit here and go down the list of what I think they should do differently. Okay. But based on what we've seen, one thing I do want to see a better job of, I want to see receivers based on what the plays are, right? We can sit here and say they should do this, they should do that. Unless you're Marcus Satterfield, unless you're Shane Beamer, it's not going to change. I do feel like they're going to try to stretch it out this week because I feel like they've been setting up. You need to be able to set the run up if you want to be able to take shots down the field vertically because the guy's going to get brought down in the box to be able to defend a run if they respect you. I do feel like, though, that South Carolina's receivers need to do a better job. I'm not saying everybody, but as a whole, they need to do a much better job of creating separation. We hear things, why isn't Josh Vann getting the ball? Why isn't this receiver getting the ball? Why aren't they throwing to this guy? It's so easy to look at the stat sheet. It's so easy. Go back and watch some of those games, though. And that's not putting it all on the receivers. Certainly the first couple games, Rattler needed to do a better job of getting the ball out, but I think it all comes back together with comfortability, trust in the offensive line, trust in your receivers. And it's very difficult to do that when you have to play at Arkansas week 2, against Georgia week 3, and you're still struggling to be able to pick up the concepts. So being able to have a Charlotte in week 4, being able to play a South Carolina in week 5, the timing could not have been any better for this offense. I truly believe that. Whether they go out there and they beat Kentucky or they just compete at a higher level than what we saw against Georgia, which I truly believe we'll see, they needed this. But as a whole, this team needs to do a better job of being able to create some separation from a wide receiver standpoint. I think that's one of the issues. This was an issue 2 years ago with this team. And anyone that remembers that season, right? Kevin Harris ran for over 1,000 yards, led the SEC in rushing yards. Shi Smith was absolutely incredible. But what happened when Shi Smith was locked down? You couldn't get the ball to anyone else. Why? Because no one else was creating separation. You need to create separation. Again, I'm not saying that there hasn't been separation out there. There has been times that Rattler has missed guys. No question about it. But there has been plenty of times, if you go back and watch the footage, that USC's receivers just aren't creating the separation needed. I feel like they're going to do a better job of that this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think the receivers let us down a few times, but there's also been a lot of little ones. Let's not, and I don't want to focus negatively on our offense anymore because I think all the groups had some stuff they had to work on and bring it together. You know what I mean? And I really want to talk about the defense a lot more, and realistically, only in a positive way. I think our defensive line can be key, and going into Kentucky. And I think a good strategy, of course, who am I? But you're a defensive mind. I think would be to spy Rodriguez and Levis early, in the game, and keep our eyes on them and don't let them hurt us coming out of the backfield early. And I think we can dominate the game a little bit more, have a little bit more of a cushion, because I do feel like our D linemen have been getting penetration all year, but missing the plays. But if we have those spies to kind of clean up the plays, I think that could be huge for us. I don't know. What do you think about that? And I'm done.
Well, Bree, I appreciate you calling into the program. I think from a defensive standpoint, we talk about spies, and spies certainly don't hurt, right? I think what it comes down to more than anything is just consistent pressure, though. And I've mentioned this before, and it's not trying to call out certain players, but it's looking at it as a whole. Losing a guy like Jordan Strawn, a guy who before the start of the season, he was a player that I predicted to lead South Carolina in sacks this season. He did a lot of good things in that Arkansas game. He left a lot out there as well in terms of some of those missed tackles, but he was in position. He is very talented. And losing a guy like Jordan Strawn, who was down 15 pounds heading into this season, who had an opportunity to sit behind guys like Aaron Sterling as well as JJ and Mbare, he learned a lot. He learned a lot. And prior to arriving at USC, he led the country in sacks in FBS when he was at Georgia State. Losing him, as well as a guy like Mo Kaba, who had a great start to the season, losing them in week 2 is devastating. And I think from a defensive standpoint, as much as we want to spend time talking about the offense, and I know there's some comments that we're getting in from the side, so I will bring those up. I appreciate you guys sending your questions and comments in. I'll bring those all up in a little bit. But losing those guys, I mean, it's kind of like you try to look at the glass half full, right? Losing guys like that, talented guys at that, starters, looking at what happened against Georgia. And it's not even about who you were playing or anything like that, but the fact that you were down 5 starters on defense, 5. And then the week after, you're down 4 starters. And the only reason you're down 4, not 5, is because you moved over Nick Eamon-Worry to a starting role by that point. Now, you already moved him over week 2, but at that point, he was still filling in for RJ Roderick. So that's where we're getting those numbers, not to create a popsicle headache. But you're down 4. You got a little bit healthier this past week. You're going to be a little bit healthier this week. You're still going to be down 2 starters, though, on the defensive side, at least for the remainder of the year with Strawn and Kaba done. You need to be able to create some pressure. I don't care who you have in the secondary. I don't. You could have Dick, Night Train Lane. You could have Deion Sanders back there. Sean Taylor. Doesn't matter. JC, it does not matter. You need to put pressure on the quarterback. You need to be able to contain the run, which is something South Carolina has struggled against. And it wasn't just against Georgia. It wasn't just against Arkansas. We've seen it over the last couple of weeks. I've mentioned this before, and I feel like they've done a little bit better of a job on the perimeter. And I'll always be very critical of the secondary because I just watch it through a different lens, haven't played it. And I think they have some really talented guys there. They need to do a better job coming off the blocks on the perimeter. They need to stop dancing around like you're going to freaking prom on a Friday night. You need to get off the blocks and you got to make a tackle. It's as simple as that. And whether it be screen passes, whether it be tosses, whether it be options, whether it be runs off tackle, whether it be even out passes, right? Just quick passes to the flats. They're all essentially an extension of the run game. And if you've been watching this program as well as some of the other Gamecock Central shows, GC Live programs, you know I've been saying that ad nauseum for the last couple of weeks. It sets up the same angles for a cornerback. It sets up the same angles, essentially, for a nickel if he's out in that situation, having to make a tackle, coming off the block. They need to do a better job of that. And you need to be able to be physical, and you need to be able to finish your tackles. You cannot allow yards after contact, and that's been an issue with South Carolina. We can go back to the Arkansas game. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but we've seen it happen. I do feel like they're in a better position right now than they were a couple weeks ago for a couple reasons. One, they are going to be a little bit healthier heading into this Kentucky game. At least that's what Beamer said. I'll bring up Joe because Joe was in that press conference today. So, Joe, you correct me if I'm wrong here for anything. Maybe you can add to it before we go to see. I see Mark, Brian, Chris. I see some more comments. Ron in the comment section. We'll bring them up in a second. You're going to be healthier this week. But number 2, you have guys now who have been thrown into the mix who maybe, and I hate to say it, maybe just weren't ready for that limelight. Maybe they weren't ready for that opportunity. thrown into the mix, midway through the Arkansas game, but, more so starting against Georgia week 3.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, throwing those guys in the fire against two of arguably the best teams in the SEC East, or in the SEC in general. Yeah, Mike, I mean, this secondary is going to have their hands full with Kentucky. I wrote about it today. Kentucky's got 3 wide receivers that have almost identical stats, at least 15 receptions for at least 15 and a half yards per play. And then, I mean, you got an NFL guy and Will Levis there, who's, I mean, very, very, very talented at the quarterback position. So, I mean, they're going to have their hands full, especially with that run game coming back to Chris Rodriguez. It's a really, really big piece. But Marcellus Dial was talking about it today. I asked him, I'm like, hey, what goes into stopping this receiving core and Will Levis? And, he's just like, they're a timing-based offense. So if you can knock those receivers off the routes and off the timing, then Levis will have to scramble and kind of, force some throws in there when, he's not necessarily supposed to. I said that's been their biggest point in the game plan going forward. And, I think if they stay to that, they got to stay disciplined to disrupt those kind of routes and stuff. But, I mean, again, that's always what Clayton White's defense has come down to, is discipline, stop at the run and in the passing game. So,
and Joe, I'm looking back, and a lot of people I know had the opportunity to watch that Kentucky and Ole Miss game since South Carolina didn't have anything going on Saturday. It was a low-scoring affair, 22-19. And one thing that really stood out to me is that Kentucky had the ball for almost 37 minutes compared to Ole Miss's 23. And I bring that up because if South Carolina is able to win the time possession, and look, when I say time possession, I know we can all be, wise guys and say, all right, time possession, what they had a pick 6 or, defense scores. That aside, because obviously you're going to take that any day of the week. You want to be able to get that number around 30. You want to be able to win the time possession. I feel like Levis is a guy, and this offense as a whole for Kentucky, when you're able to get them out of rhythm, it really screws everything up from a timing standpoint. We talk about timing, of course, from, being able to be physical at the line of scrimmage, right? Whether it be pressing a receiver, whether it be just throwing off a timing from a passing route standpoint. I'm talking time about from a quarterback standpoint, being on the field, trying to get in rhythm in that sense. So as far as South Carolina goes, right? We talk about turnovers. Of course, that's big. Of course, that's big. You need to be able to get turnovers. You've caused 6 over the last 2 weeks. Now, again, the interceptions are the interceptions. And it's not about Rattler. It's about the team. South Carolina gave the football away more than they should have last week. But in the last 2 weeks, they are +1. They are +1. You need to be better. You need to be better. 3 interceptions the last 2 weeks, 6 interceptions combined the last 2 weeks. You need to be better this week. You cannot be giving this Kentucky team the same luxury that you gave South Carolina State last week, that you gave even Charlotte. Because what's going to happen is you do that, you're not going to be able to be in this game. You won't be. Through the first 3 games, South Carolina was -7 in the turnover department. -7. They need to clean that up this week. They need to clean this up. I want to go back through some of the comments that we have here right now. This intern Joe takes a little breather for a second. Ron Wells, I know I popped this up a little earlier, but I just want to be able to comment on some of them. Always hoping for the best, but just don't see our current OC as the answer. I understand the frustration. I understand it. What I will say is, though, I feel like we'll know more about the offense this week. And I know some are going to be like, oh, I already know what the answer is. Could be right. You could be right. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And the reason why is because, again, and I've been going back and saying this in the preseason, so I'm just trying to be consistent. All preseason, I said it was going to take until week 4, week 5, until this offense was able to get into some type of rhythm. For the reasons I stated at the beginning of this show, and like I've said for the last couple of weeks, playing the teams they did early on, new quarterback, it was inevitable that the timing wasn't going to be there, that the trust wasn't going to be there. I've used this example before. I'll use it here. Tom Brady, greatest quarterback that's ever played. Watch him when he was in Tampa the first couple games. It takes some time. It doesn't matter who the frig you are. It takes some time. South Carolina's luck, if you want to call it that, with the schedule, getting to play Charlotte, SC State when they did, after getting their teeth kicked in against Georgia, it could not have come at a better time. And I feel like the comfortability has grown from an offensive standpoint. I feel like the confidence level has grown. We've seen that with Marshawn Lloyd. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. But it's stuff like that where it doesn't matter if you're playing a Georgia or if you're playing TikTok Tech. When you're going out there and you're getting the results, it's going to give you confidence. Now, and I said it doesn't matter if it's Georgia. Of course, if you go out there, you're doing this against the number 1 team or the number 2 team, of course it's going to spark something, no question. But at the end of the day, regardless if it's against Georgia, Alabama, or TikTok Tech, you have to do it again the next week. You have to do it again in the next week. But you've been able now to put it on tape. Your teammates can see it. You can figure out, okay, this is why it worked. Now go out there and just do it again. And it's so much easier said than done. But I do like what they've accomplished the last couple of weeks. I really do. And I know some are going to be like, all right, can we see it against Kentucky? I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. But I just don't think it's fair to just oversee what they've accomplished the last 2 weeks. Because if they do beat Kentucky, if they are able to compete in Lexington, a place that they have struggled at as of late, if they're able to do that, what are you going to give credit to? What are you going to give credit to? Same play caller. Most likely the play calling is going to still be the same, whether you like it or not. What are you going to give credit to? To me, where I would give credit to is the fact that they were able to make some type of improvement in week 4 and week 5. Again, this is all hypotheticals. I hate topic in hypotheticals and creating, what ifs. But if we're sitting here a week from today and South Carolina is able to beat Kentucky, what are you going to give credit to? If you just had to take a guess, I'm telling you what I would give credit to. It's what they were able to accomplish the last 2 weeks. So that's what I'm looking at. Will we be able to get any sacks this week? It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And this is a team that has really struggled. I mean, Joe, I want to add you in. I see you got the hand up like you're
yeah.
Like you are our good friend Bobby Boucher raising his hand in the science class over there. So again, South Carolina has struggled to get to the quarterback. We know that, and I brought this up, no Mo Kaba there, no Jordan Strawn. Guys are going to have to step up. What's your thoughts on this one, Joe?
I mean, I watched Kentucky and Ole Miss like everyone else on Saturday. I thought Kentucky's offensive line looked awful. To be honest, I think this is as good a chance of ever for this defensive line to kind of get back on track and get to the quarterback a little bit more. Kentucky's had some banged up offensive linemen, I believe. So that's kind of where all of that is stemming from. And that also goes to testament how good Levis is as a quarterback, because he's still doing things when his offensive line isn't at its best. But no, I think, again, this week it's going to be the defensive line's chance to finally prove what they can do against an SEC offensive line, Mike.
I'm going to go back to Chris here. Our defense has progressed so much over the years since Spurrier left. Dare I say the best it has been since the 2013-14 season. I definitely feel like they made improvements from the 2020 to 2021 season. I think right now, from a defensive standpoint, it's really been a case of just overcoming some of these injuries. I don't feel like we have a good sense of what this defense can become because of how hurt they are. Now, I say that here on October 4th, and just like it was 2 weeks ago, no Strawn, no Kaba, at some point that can't be an excuse anymore. It just can't. And if South Carolina is plagued with some of these injuries, and you pray to God that some of these guys that have been banged up, that it's not a reoccurring thing, but it certainly can happen, right? You go in there, you don't know how quickly some of these players are going back out there. It's natural, right? And that's not to say that USC's throwing these players out there too quick. I mean, it's just part of the game. You get hurt, there's always a possibility you could re-injure something, So I say that because they're doing things this year, and Joe, we've mentioned this last week on the program. I know you wrote a story about it not too long ago. They need to do a better job of creating turnovers. They've done that the last 2 weeks. Again, bring up a statistic. They were +1 over the last 2 games.
Yeah.
And in large part because they had just stupid giveaways on offense. The 2 drop passes that led to interceptions, some of the fumbles that occurred, okay? +1, though. +1. 6 interceptions in the last 2 games. 6. In those 3 games to start the year. -7. -7. So, again, that's not to say that the offense is not, to let them off the hook for the first 3 games. But defensively, you're not helping yourself. The block kicks, that's great. It's fantastic. You need turnovers, though. You need turnovers. So this weekend, it's about creating turnovers. It's about creating turnovers, and you need them. So, Chris, I think from a talent standpoint, USC certainly has the talent right now. They do. Now it's about applying it to the field. I think from a passing standpoint, even with Strawn being down, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, even with them being banged up, even in the secondary, Marcellus Dial, I know he's been picked on a little bit. He has 2 interceptions on the year. He took advantage of SC State coming to him the other towards the, I don't know if it was the middle of the game, the second half. I think it was a comeback route by Shaq Davis for SC State. And the QB thought he was going to go, do a go route. Marcellus had the interception there. Marcellus has been picked on, but that happens when you're the backup cornerback. So I say all this because even with South Carolina having to go to some of their backups, and again, as I brought this up before, I don't care who the hell you have in your secondary. I really don't. You need to have a pass rush. If South Carolina doesn't have a strong pass rush, you're really going to put your defensive backs in a bad position. So the fact that South Carolina is getting a little healthier this week in the secondary, that's fantastic. But they need to create pressure this week, because if you do not create pressure on Will Levis, you're going to be in for a long day. You really are. But the passing game defense, as far as that goes, the pass defense, I don't think it's been that bad. I really don't. I think the rush defense can improve tremendously. It's really been a mess right now, Joe. But I think the passing is, as much as, you've been banged up in this, all things considered, I guess is the best way to put it. All things considered, with the fact that you've been banged up in the secondary and you've been banged up in the, in the front as far as a pass rush is concerned, the pass defense just, it hasn't been the issue. It's the rush defense for the most part.
Yeah, and again, they're going to have their hands full with Chris Rodriguez. I think Rodriguez looked great against Ole Miss. I think, the passing game starts with the DBs. It starts with Cam Smith. You get Darius Rush back. You get RJ Roderick back. And, yeah, that kind of puts Marcellus Dial on an island, but he loves it. Like, he's really, enjoying the challenge of, kind of getting picked on. And, I asked him about it today. I'm like, does having RJ Roderick and Cam Smith and Darius Rush healthy, does that help you at all, on the island with communication and stuff? And, he's like, yeah, absolutely. So it makes him feel a little bit more at home. So I think this defense is getting their veteran guys back at the right time, going down, into SEC play. And this is a big game for this defense. I mentioned earlier about the defensive line needing to step up. It's a big game for the secondary too. They've got their hands full with this wide receiving core and Will Levis. So, it's a prove-it game for this defense for sure.
And we've looked at it. We've looked at it over the last couple of weeks when we've watched Kentucky. Florida did a good job of limiting Levis. Ole Miss, of course, last week did a good job of limiting Levis. I know he still had 2 touchdowns, but you look over the last couple of weeks. Something that's really stood out to me, and this is something, and I can't remember. I think it may have been DC, David Coninger from the Post-Courier that posted this today. South Carolina has struggled to finish sacks. And I bring that up because when you look at what Kentucky has done the last couple of weeks, this is how many sacks they've allowed so far through 5 games. 19 sacks. 3 last week. 5 against NIU the week before, who, oh, by the way, lost to Kentucky by 8 points. On the road in Lexington.
Yeah.
3, 5, 4, 3, 4. 19 sacks allowed on the year.
Yeah.
19 sacks. So I say that because Florida, 3 sacks. Ole Miss, 3 sacks. Both those games, Levis was held to 220 yards passing this past week, 202 against Florida. I say that because you need to put pressure on him. You need to put pressure on him. Now, it all depends. Are they going to run the football? Are they going to try to pass the ball? Because obviously your opportunities can be limited if you're not going to see as many passing opportunities. But the point being is you hope you stop the run to force Kentucky to pass the ball. And if they do that, just like we've seen with South Carolina when teams have forced them to pass the ball when they've got away from the run game, whether it be this year, whether it be in the past, it makes things a hell of a lot easier from a defensive standpoint. So I bring that up. I do want to go through some of these comments here on the side. And Chris, I know you said you're a first-time listener. We appreciate you tuning on in. See what Brian has to say here. They said we were deep at wide receiver, so why can't we connect on many passes? Is it Rattler or is it the play calling? I think, and this does go back to coaching, you got to figure out how the hell you want to utilize the talent that you have. Coaches talk about this all the time. Doesn't matter what level you are. I'm covering the Patriots. I got to deal with Bill Belichick tomorrow, even though he doesn't say too much. You'll hear it even at this level in the NFL, which is it's a good problem to have when you have a lot of talent. When you look at South Carolina, I've been covering the team since 2016. I've been covering the SEC since 2015. South Carolina just has not had depth like they have right now at wide receiver in quite some time. You got to figure a way to get these guys the ball. There's no question about it. Now, with that all being said, and I bring that up because I saw a comment that made me think. I'm trying to see if I can pull this up, where exactly it is. That basically, and if I can't find it, here it is. Here's another question for Brian. If you can't pass on Charlotte, how do you do it on an SEC team? I get the run was easy, but why not practicing in a real game? Well, going into Charlotte was ranked third to last in FBS in rush defense. They were the worst defense in FBS going into that game. As far as SC State is concerned, we knew that they were going to be a little bit more sound up front, but still you should be able to run the football on them. And that's exactly what they did. To me, and this is not, I don't know what Marcus Satterfield, what this team as a whole, what they're thinking in terms of, I'm not saying this is like a chess match, but I feel like they wanted to be able to establish the run because they felt like they could do that. We've sat here before on the GC Live post-game show. We've talked about it before. If you're going to run the football, what's going to happen? You're not going to throw the ball as much. South Carolina didn't need to throw the football last week as much in comparison to maybe what they have to do this week. They didn't have to really throw the football that much the week prior against Charlotte. And yet they still produce back-to-back games of 50 points, something that they had not done since 1995, 27 years. And again, I know there's going to be people that will say, well, they're playing the competition. There should be. I get that. 27 years, though. It's not like South Carolina hasn't had back-to-back weeks against inferior competition that they shouldn't have beat the crap out of. Give credit. It's okay to give credit. And that was the whole point of my article, that there's still flaws with this team, but it's okay to recognize some of the improvements they've made. So as far as the passing game goes, and I've had talks with Marcus Lattimore about this. We'll do the podcast tomorrow. We'll get some more insight about this. Being able to run the football, especially for a team that struggled to really do anything from an offensive standpoint the first 3 weeks of the season. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. It's so cliche to say, what the heck isn't the identity of the offense? It's not about, passing, run. Sometimes it's just about being physical, whatever the case may be. There was no sense of direction with this offense, it felt like. But yet, these last 2 weeks, take advantage of the competition that you're going up against. Charlotte, SC State, South Carolina did that. And by running the football, you've proven that you can run the ball. I get it. It's not SEC competition. I get that. but you've proven you can run the football. You've proven you can understand what the heck you're trying to do from an offensive standpoint, starting with the quarterback to the O-line to the receivers. And again, I feel like the offensive line has done a much better job as the season's gone on. I'm not saying there's all Americans across the front. I'm not saying that this offensive line is going to lead you to a 10-2 record in the regular season. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there has been improvements. There has been improvements. Can you continue to take steps forward, instead of going back this week against a Kentucky team who is going to be a much better test? They're going to be bigger. They're going to be faster. They're going to be stronger than what you've seen over the last 2 weeks. But again, for the first time all season long, you've been able to do things that make you say, hey, look, I understand why they're asking us to do this from a coaching standpoint as players. I understand what this is supposed to look like. It's difficult to do that when you go out there and you're playing against an Arkansas and you're going against a Georgia and you're still trying to figure out the system and the scheme and you have a new quarterback. It's difficult to see that. Yeah, you can go out and practice and, okay, I'm going up against Johnny every freaking day. I know his strengths and his weaknesses. He knows my strengths. What are you really going to get out of that? Really? When you're doing good on good, ones-on-ones in practice, you have to be able to do it against other players in a game. So I say all that because I feel like from a confidence standpoint, it is there. It has grown. Will it be enough this week against Kentucky? Only time will tell. But as far as passing goes, the passing lanes the first couple of weeks, I felt like teams were respecting Rattler, combined with the fact that South Carolina was struggling running the football, that they weren't bringing an extra guy in the box down. And I've brought this up a couple times throughout the show, but I'm bringing this up again because if Kentucky respects you enough from what you were able to do the last 2 weeks, those passing lanes will be there. The screens, the short passes, running the ball, all that stuff. What does that do? That's going to suck the defense up. And yes, Rattler has been a little bit off sometimes on those deep throws. We've seen him connect on some of those deep throws. We saw it against Georgia. We saw it even last week against SC State on the first drop with Xavier Legette. He's been there. They can connect. And if teams continue to suck up because they respect what you're doing from a run standpoint, those deep threat opportunities, those deep ball, they're going to be there. And I feel like the vertical game that fans are looking for, I'm not saying it's going to be a Big 12 matchup and Rattler's going to throw the ball 10, 15 times down. That's not what I'm saying. I feel like we'll see more opportunities this week. But what it comes down to more than anything is if you can be able to establish the run to an extent. I'm not saying it has to replicate. I'm not naive. I mean, you're not playing Charlotte or Charlotte this week. If you can be able to run the football to a point where Kentucky respects you, they have to bring an extra guy down. That's going to open up the passing lanes. That's what you're hoping for. Marcus Lattimore said the exact same thing last week before the SC State game, after what he saw against Charlotte. You do that, it's going to build the confidence of everyone around you. Everyone. QB, offensive line, running backs. Rattler is a good quarterback, okay? I'm not saying he's a great quarterback. I'm not saying he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. And I know I'm just being sarcastic at this point. But what I'm trying to get at is the guy has an arm. He was talented at Oklahoma. There's a reason why he was the Big 12 Player of the Year his freshman year. As a freshman, the freshman Player of the Year. He can make throws. He's been able to gain some confidence this week. And if you give him an opportunity to throw the football, people think, okay, Rattler sucks, he's a bust, this and that. Give him an opportunity. Bring an extra guy down in the box and leave someone on an island. And if the receiver creates separation, if you want to do that, then do it. I think Rattler is going to be able to make them pay. If that does happen in those matchups. We'll have to wait and see, though. Happy. I like the name. I say that because the Gamecocks, cannot seem to get off to a quick start. At least to the point the Gamecocks just have not been a quick start team. And I'm going back to your previous message. The D needs to create a lot of havoc for Kentucky's O in order to win this weekend. Now, look, This is something that Ben Portnoy, the state newspaper, brought up last week, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. It's like 100 points. In the Shane Beamer era, and I'm trying to make sure, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong. Did South Carolina play an FCS opponent last year? I'm trying to remember. I don't think they did. I'll see if Joe can double check that. And I know there could be someone listening saying like, yes, no. I don't think they did. But regardless, throw that number out the window because I was going to say it's been 5 games this year, but it would be 4 because you take the FCS opponent last week away. 17 games, whatever the ballpark is, 17, 15 games. You get the point. South Carolina has been outscored 100 points in the first half. They've been even slower in the first quarter, and Joe gives me confirmation that they didn't play an FCS opponent last year. So that'd be 17 games. 17 games you've gone up against FBS opponents. In the first half, you've been outscored by 100 points. You need to find a way to figure it out early on in the game. We saw what it can do. We saw what it did. I believe they got out to a hot start against Florida, right, Joe? I mean, they had a hot start last year against Florida. They had a hot start against North Carolina in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. They're capable of doing it. And that was with extra time. Now, circumstances a little bit different. It's not an extra week, but still have 2 extra days. Still have 2 extra days because you played a Thursday night game. They need to find a way. I agree with you 100%. If South Carolina comes out slow in this game and they fall into a hole, and I'm not even saying it has to be a hole like we saw a year ago against Tennessee. I mean, that was just pitiful. But if they're able to find a way to come out fast and they're able to put up points early on in this game, this is a team that, for the most part, in this small sample size, it's been 18 games if you want to count the SC State game. In this 18-game sample size, for the most part, they have really improved as the game has gone on. Second half, especially in the fourth quarter. If South Carolina can put themselves in a position where this game is close by the half, I like their chances. I really do. I know it's going to be a hostile environment. This is a team that for the first time, since 2018? First time since 2018 that they'll be going to Lexington, Kentucky, playing in front of what can be a packed house. And I say that because obviously with COVID 2 years ago. So for a lot of the players on this team, this is going to be a different feel for them. Parker White was on Mixing the Water Monday earlier this week, and one of the things that he brought up is just the way that stadium is set up. They're right on top of you. They're right on top of you. And I want to go back. They did play Eastern Illinois. So, you have 2 SCS opponents in there. But you get the point, right? So you take the 2 away, let's do some math here. 16 games, 16-game sample. Point being is South Carolina has struggled. It'd be 16 games, 17 games against FBS opponents. They've struggled in the first half, being outscored by nearly 100 points, according to Ben Portnoy of the state newspaper. You need to do a better job of that this week. How do you do a better job of that? Well, you create turnovers. We know that. But from an offensive standpoint, and I've been waiting to see South Carolina do this. I mean, we saw it against Charlotte. I want them to be able to go down on those scripted plays that they have to start the game. I guess Charlotte resulted in a field goal, so I guess still we're waiting to see it. Go down and score a touchdown the opening drive. Go down and score a touchdown the opening drive. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. But from a defensive standpoint, no question, happy. I agree with you on that front. Lady Bree, this could be a shootout, D struggle, or a blowout. Depends on both teams, D's really. I think we're going to have to wait and see. South Carolina will be in a better position right now. From a defensive standpoint, we are assuming, based on the injury report today from Shane Beamer, they will be in a better position from a health standpoint compared to what they have been the last couple of weeks. Again, still down Mo Kaba, still down Jordan Strawn, but you're going to have guys who have had to fill in for those guys over the last couple of weeks who have more experience now. And you hope they're able to make an impact this week. Because if they can't, it's going to be a long day for South Carolina. I don't think so. I don't think South Carolina, it's not about being talented enough. I just think it's just the way, whether it be the scheme from a coaching standpoint, I just don't think they're built to get into a shootout with the team right now. Not on the level of Kentucky. I think if you want to win this game, and we saw it with Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss, the last couple of years under Lane Kiffin, hasn't been a team that you just think, oh, defense. They have a great They had a tremendous performance. It was an outstanding performance defensively the other day. Outstanding. And it feels like that's a team more built for a track meet. They turned it into a defensive struggle. I feel like that's what South Carolina is going to have to do if they want to beat Kentucky this weekend. Brian, again, if you can't pass against Charlotte, we mentioned that before. And the point being is, you try to run the football, you take advantage of what the defense is giving you. And I felt like they were able to do exactly that. We hit on that before with happy. Brian, again, I thought Missouri was a guaranteed win, but when I watched the Georgia game, I hope I'm wrong, but I only see one SEC win for sure. I think that's the beauty of college football, right? We can look week to week and be like, well, look what they did this week, and look at that. South Carolina, again, we'll learn more about them this week when they play against Kentucky. Okay? FCS team 2 weeks ago, SC State last week. I don't think they're the same team like they were a week ago. Joe's over here, and I hate doing these friggin' predictions and this and that. Intern Joe, you're going to really piss me off, but I'm going to let you say it anyway, pal. So they can go 6-2. Now, before I let you go on your little rant here, please spare us from going down. I think they can beat this team. Please spare us, okay? I would do the same. I'm gonna, I know Lady Bree. She's mentioned it before. Spare us. I'm just picking on you, Lady Bree. But give us a reason, opposed to, I think they can beat this team and lose that. Give us a reason why you feel that South Carolina can turn the page as they approach the midway point of the season.
No, this is just, again, it's a hypothetical. I'm not by any means. I'm not saying they're gonna go 6-2. But I think, if you look at it, you had the 2 non-conference games that were very big morale games for you. They found an identity in the run game in both games. The defense finally started generating some turnovers and found some identity, and you're getting some of these guys back. I think Kentucky is the one domino that really can kickstart this thing going down the stretch. If South Carolina can beat Kentucky at Kentucky, it's really, really going to start some momentum for the program and, just for the team going forward. And, Mike, again, we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, the turnovers. If they can keep the turnover game, continuously rolling through the next, 4 or 5 weeks, you could see some upsets. And, I agree with whoever said that Missouri looked really good. Yeah, Missouri does look really good. They showed that they can kind of play. They can beat almost beat anybody. But again, Mike, I think this team has the chance to kind of push the one domino down that, really gets something going for them, especially down the road in SEC play. But this is a big one for sure.
And I want to give a shout out to Mark. Mark, appreciate you. Just getting back to seeing some of the comments here. Eastern Illinois is an FCS opponent. Yes, they are. I don't know, Intern Joe, I know I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. Has Kentucky released any information about injuries from Ole Miss game? I know one of their O-linemen and a linebacker, I believe, are questionable. I don't know if we have any updates on that right now, Joe. I think here's the issue. Here's the issue with college athletics. And I'm not saying anything that you guys don't know. This is just, from doing all this NFL stuff the last couple of weeks with the Patriots, I love the fact that you have an injury report from the NFL every single day. Because some college coaches, they'll be upfront with you. And it's not about being upfront, but it's just they don't have to. They don't have to tell you. So bottom line is this. Whether Kentucky is missing guys or not, they're going to be banged up. And you got to exploit it. So the fact that they're banged up a little bit on the O-line, a team that has allowed 19 sacks for the first 5 games of the season. And then from a defensive standpoint, at linebacker, whether the guy's down, whether the guy plays or not, they're going to be banged up at the linebacker spot. That should benefit you in terms of running the football. If you've been able to make progress the way that you truly believe that you have, and again, I feel like this team has at least took some steps forward. I don't know exactly from a progress standpoint what Marcus Satterfield and the players feel like, but I'm sure they feel like they have made progress. If you feel like you can run the football, knowing, regardless if the outside, if the linebacker is playing this week or if the linebacker is out, that should make you feel better about running the football. I think South Carolina is going to try to run the ball in this game. I think they're going to try to establish the run early, and that's going to open up the passing game. We're going to see some play action in there. We're going to see guys have opportunities to stretch the field on this team. I truly believe that. I really do. You look at what Ole Miss did. Ole Miss ran the football for 186 yards, almost 5 yards a carry. 186 yards, 39 carries, 29 passing attempts. I'm not saying they're going to run the football the same way like they did against Charlotte or SC State. I'm not the brightest person, but I'm not that dumb. However, I would not be shocked to see them try to run the football on Kentucky this week. I want to bring up some of these other messages. We got Lady Bree. I need more time to explain myself. This is your show, sweetie. Lady Bree, I'm just teasing you. Mark, we can win if we are creative with the use of Marshawn, Juju, and Jaheim Bell. Mark, I agree. I say that, and I think the people that are listening, they agree with you too. There's going to be some that say, okay, how are they going to do that? How are they going to do that? Because to some, they feel like the creativity just hasn't been there. I don't know if it's just strictly creativity. I think the offense is the offense. I really do, Joe. It's not going to be this sexy style offense that you're seeing, or it's an NFL style. And again, NFL style is different from what we're seeing with what Kansas City's doing with Pat Mahomes. It's different from what we're seeing with Josh Allen. Pro style is not the sexiest style of offense. It just strictly comes down to just executing. Now, we can have that story another day. Is this the best fit for what the talent this team has? Is the best fit for them? We could talk about that another time. But as far as how they get creative with these three guys in particular, I think with Marshawn, it's just being able to get the ball to him early and often. Is that creative? I don't think it's really creative. I think it's just you have to do it. As far as Juju is concerned, continuing to find ways to get him on the field, not just for the sake of getting him on the field, but getting him on the field with a purpose. Not just putting him out there, right? You know, best way to compare it is the carry-on joiner. Let's just put him at quarterback right now. Are you doing it with a purpose, though? Do it with a purpose if you put Juju on the field. Because Juju is a nice changeup. You can throw Christian Beal-Smith out there, but, you know, the point being is it's a nice changeup for Marshawn Lloyd. And as far as Jaheim Bell goes, I think they're still trying to figure out how the heck to use him. And you know how you use him, Joe? You simplify things. Go back to what you did against North Carolina.
Yeah.
You know, put him in the slot, put him on the outside. Don't keep moving him around like he's a chess piece. And that's not to say he doesn't have the talent to be. I know he doesn't like to be called it, but he's, you know, was referred to as Debo 2.0 by Marcus Satterfield back in the spring. Enough of that. Enough of trying to move him around like he's a pawn, you know, in a chess match. Get him the ball. Just get him the ball. As simple as it, whatever it is to make things simple for him. Because when he has the ball in his hands, he's talented. There's no question about it. We've seen it. Simplify things. That's actually, and I'm not saying specifically about Jaheim Bell, but I think back to something that Pat DeMarco mentioned recently. And Pat DeMarco mentioned, you know, just being able to simplify things a little bit on offense after having worked with Marcus Satterfield. I know we've fallen behind a little bit as we get ready to head into 8 o'clock. We got to wrap things up in a little bit. Mark Anderson, screens and play action. Mark, there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with you because they're so sick and tired of hearing all of that. But I feel like that's what this team's built around. I feel like from an offensive standpoint, and, happy brings up the weapons. No question we have the weapons. Unfortunately, in my opinion, they just haven't been put into an explosive enough position to affect ball games. I just think it's just the way the scheme is. The scheme is the scheme. The scheme is the scheme. It's pro style. It's not sexy. But that's not to say it can't be done efficiently, and it can't be done in a manner in which can lead to a lot of points, because we saw that the last 2 weeks. It's not going to be as easy against a Kentucky, against a Texas A&M, Florida, Tennessee, et cetera, but it can be done. Just got to be smart with the football, though, too. We got to get some of those ads in before we wrap up the program. Intern Joe, appreciate you, buddy, bringing that up. Tell you what, Joe, I'm trying to hide some of these messages here because we do appreciate everyone shooting comments in here. Liberty Tax, they have been a big supporter of Gamecock Central for a long time and sponsor every GC Live show, not just Talking Tuesday. So check them out. Be able to overcome your taxiety. Tax season, it feels like it is an ongoing thing. You want to make sure that you're getting all the money that you deserve, and you want to make sure, too, that you're not getting yourself in trouble. So give them a call. Liberty Tax, 803-462-5576. And in addition to our friends over at Liberty Tax, Clint Hammond, he is one of the best in Columbia. Be sure to check him out as well. It is a funky time right now to buy a home. Clint can help you make that process a hell of a lot easier. We had Perry Orth on, former Gamecock quarterback. He mentioned before that Clint was the guy that he called. So why not trust Perry, trust the former Gamecock, give Clint a call, and be able to make that process so much easier for you. We appreciate both Liberty Tax as well as Clint Hammond at the Mortgage Network for doing everything they have in their sponsorship with Gamecock Central, especially when it comes to GC Live. I want to look at a couple more comments here, Joe, and then we'll wrap things up. Why hasn't Xavier Legette made any progress in 4 years? It's a good question. I mean, I wish I had an answer for you. I think, last week, it's real easy to look at last week and be like, all right, this is what Xavier Legette is. Put that aside, and I just bear with me. Put that aside, because I don't think last week necessarily defines him, is what I'm trying to get at. I just feel like that room as a whole has grown so much that the opportunities to be able to get the football continue to get slimmer and slimmer for every player. So when those opportunities do come knocking, you need to be able to take them, make the most out of it, and just take it and literally run. And I feel like that's why a lot of people look at it and be like, why isn't Xavier took those steps? You just got to be able to make the most out of your opportunities. And I feel like there have been times where he has in the past. I don't think last week necessarily defines him, but certainly it's going to be something that's on a lot of people's mind because it's the most recent thing that we have of him. And it was a tough game. It was a very tough game from him. There's no other way to put it. Mark, going back to it, right? Simplify things. Brian, I'm the most proud of our special teams improvement this year. Brian, they've been awesome. Again, we had Parker White on Mixing Water Monday, and he could not say enough things positively about not just Mitch Jeter, not just Kai Kroger, but Pete Lembo, and just how special teams is just viewed at South Carolina now. I think it's so easy to be like, well, it's, Shane Beamer ball. Yes, he understands the importance of special teams. Goes back to Frank, of course, right? His dad. But at the same time, too, you need to invest in it. And they've done that, hiring a full-time special teams coordinator in Pete Lembo, and the results speak for themselves. Patrick, this is a big game. It is a big game. It is a big game. Patrick adds again, if the offense drops a 0, it doesn't say competitive, what does this mean for the rest of the season? I know I've done some, and I told you before, I hate topping in hypotheticals. If they don't score a point this week, I think it's clear that there would be some changes. But I don't want to sit here and say, this is what's going to happen. We'll wait. We'll wait till we get to that point. If that's the case, post-game show on Saturday night, I believe we got Michael Scarnecchia this week. So I'm sure Scar would have plenty to say. What's that, Joe?
We got Perry this week.
We got Perry this week.
I'm
losing track of the season. The season's just flying by on us. We'll have Perry on this week. Perry would have plenty to say, I'm sure, about that situation. But we'll have to wait and see. I think the bottom line is this. We'll wrap it up like this because I gotta hop on and speak to a class over at Assumption University. But I will say this though, Joe. What I want to see from the offense this week, I want to be able to see them show that there has been progress made from week 4 to week 5 to now week 6 against Kentucky. I want them to be able to have success running the football to a point where you feel comfortable about what you've been able to accomplish. And I word it that way because, again, I'm not naive. I don't think they're going to go out there and put 240 yards up on the ground. If I'm wrong, awesome. Absolutely incredible. Because we saw what Ole Miss did last week to Kentucky. They almost ran for 200 yards on them. So it's possible to have success on the ground against Kentucky. Can you do it now against guys that are bigger, faster, stronger in comparison to SC State, in comparison against a team like Charlotte? And if they do creep down the box and you have opportunities to throw the ball downfield, can you make the most out of your opportunities? That's what I want to see this week. And from a defensive standpoint, create turnovers. Do your best. Do your best to try to stop the run game. I feel like this defense, because there's been so many injuries, I still don't know who they are. I really don't. And maybe this weekend we'll start to paint a clearer picture in terms of that answering that question.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, absolutely. It's definitely a big game for sure. Like, this is where, everything starts if they plan on having success in the SEC. It all comes down to stopping the run and running the football. Containing Will Levis, kind of getting to him and knocking him off his rhythm is going to be big. And again, I think, like I said earlier, Mike, you have the perfect storm for this defense. You got the veterans coming back. You've got a bunch of turnovers in the last couple of games, and you have a real test in front of you. Now is your chance to go and show, what you can do and what you're made of with full strength with RJ back. I mean, sure, you're missing Jordan Strawn and Mo Kaba, but still, I mean, you have Cam Smith, you have Darius Rush back. You're getting a lot of the guys back, so now is the time, right? And it's a big road game. If they can go in there and, flip things and come out victorious as underdogs, I think it means a lot for the program and a lot for this team going down the road.
Well, I think you put it best, Joe. But at the same time, too, they just got to go out there and execute. They have to go out there. They have to execute. They got to make these things happen because this is a team that, again, we all know it's not going to be as easy as what it's been like over the last couple of weeks. We know that. I mean, it goes without saying. But if you're able to go out there and do these things, you're going to put yourself in a good position to succeed. Just a reminder, guys, after the game on Saturday, be sure to call into the GC Live post-game show. Same number, just a different time. And that time will be right after kickoff. So, right after the game ends. I say kickoff. We can call in. At that point, no one's going to be there. Game's going to kick off, though, at 7:30. That puts us around, around 11 o'clock. Typically, these games have been going for about 3.5 hours. So, expect us to go on air around that 11 o'clock hour. We'll go on for about an hour. Again, as Joe alluded to, we will have Michael Scarnecchia joining us this week.
Oh, Perry. We have Perry this week. Sorry.
I'll tell you what, I'm wearing the shirt right now, mixing a water. I keep thinking Scarnecchia is joining us this week. Perry Orth will be joining us. I was talking to them earlier. That's the reason why. Perry will be joining us. We'll have Scarnecchia back on the program. Mixing a water, Mike. But it'll be good. It'll be good to be able to have those guys on the program. Patrick, we appreciate you. And nice comment. There you go. Intern Joe. We always good seeing Intern Joe. We will have Perry on this week. It'll be good. It'll be good to be able to listen to Perry because Perry brings tremendous insight. I mean, both guys do. Both guys do. So, again, guys, we appreciate you listening, and we will do this on Saturday on the GC Live post-game show. Intern Joe, appreciate you, and everyone that watched and listened tonight, wherever you are watching and listening across the country, appreciate you guys. We'll do it again on Saturday and again next week on the GC Live Talking Tuesday podcast.